Recently, we filmed a day of archaeology in the Lower Suwannee National Wildlife Refuge near Cedar Key. Ranger Pam Darty describes the refuge.
We're 53,000 acres split down the middle by the historic Suwannee River. We have 30 coastal miles and then 13 islands out at the Cedar Keys National Wildlife Refuge. And the University of Florida's archaeology department has been over here for 3 years performing surveys and digs to give us a little bit more background about the people that would have been here long before Europeans invaded the area. This is a shell mound unit. It has several trails, but the main feature, in fact, what I think is the jewel of the refuge, is the mound itself. Crescent-shaped mound right on the edge of the Gulf. It's 28 feet high. We figure the midden itself is about 6,000 years old, so people have been living here at least 6,000 years, if not longer. That's what the archaeology department will figure out soon, I hope. We've gotten 2 different types of digs going on here. One right on the mound, so digging down through the shell, down to the sand. And then this is actually in a domestic use area. There's lots of evidence of domestic debris here, lots of pottery shards, greasy soil, which lets us know that there was a lot of organic material in here as well.
Wow. Did you guys know it was that big?
Well, not that big.
You said it a few times, yeah.
So this you map this in.
Core. There's a core in the wall.
Yeah, this is a nice plate core. So map this in and then bag this as a point plot for that level.
Okay.
Okay, get an elevation at the base here.
Okay.
All right, cool.
This is a hunk of chert. It would either be used as like a multi-tool type of thing. It would be like your prehistoric, like Swiss Army knife, so you could just carry this with you and flint knap it into whatever you would want to use it for. But this flakes easily, so you could hit it with another rock and get some nice slivers off of it. That would be very sharp and a very quick way to get some tools. This is a Welk hammer. What people would do is they would drill a hole in one side and then out the other like this, and this is really crude, but then they could put a stick in there and use it as a battering ram for things.
Break open oyster shells.
Break open oysters, break apart stone crabs. We all know how tough those are to get open.
This is the shell mound site just north of Cedar Key. It's the largest shell deposit north of Crystal River that's more or less fully intact. This site became archaeologically known to us many decades ago. There was work done here in 1959 by an amateur archaeologist. It was written up in 1970 by Ripley Bullen at the Florida State Museum at the time, which is now the Florida Museum of Natural History. They excavated at the top of this thing, which is just behind us here, to the northwest. At the top of the mound, they went down about 10 feet and found pottery that dates to about 2,000 years ago, along with, of course, lots of oyster shell, animal bone, mostly fish and turtle, and not much of anything else. It's a typical sort of shell midden deposit, which includes food remains. And then what we've done here is we've tried to excavate some units that'll get us to the bottom of it. They documented the top. We have a sense that the bottom of this thing might be considerably older than 2,000 years ago. And it looks like that dates to about 2,500 years ago. We have some pottery that dates to that time period. We, of course, will take samples from it, not only for reconstructing the diet with all the food remains, but for getting charcoal for radiocarbon samples and other materials that will help us interpret what was going on here. This is actually the southern aspect of this site. It's a very large site. It goes about 200 meters to the north, about 150 meters to the west here. And we can take a little stop here along the way to the east and see what appears to be the village area of the site, which is the interior of this crescent-shaped mound. I don't know if you could pick this up in here. This is LiDAR coverage of the mound. It's about 200 meters in diameter. We're right here at the southern aspect of this distal arm. It has an interior core that is relatively flat, and we believe this to be the original village area of the site with the shell ridge that was constructed around it. Close to the northwest, open to the southeast, with a sand mound to the southeast that possibly is mortuary. Another sand mound over here to the northeast. If this is the prevailing wind direction, a practical aspect for this is that this thing actually would have been a nice windbreak for the village. There's more to it than that, because we know that this configuration recurs across the region, and we believe that it's actually significant for reasons beyond practical living. And the placement of the sand mound to the opening of this, the apex on the opposite side here, may be telling us something more about everyday living, reflecting perhaps symbolic aspects of their life, cosmology, ritual practices, and so forth. We could take a walk over here to the village area and talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
Okay, so we're now standing at the southeast aspect of the site, and looking here to the northwest, there's this large open area, probably about 75 meters in diameter. When we started working at this site, or in this region, we haven't worked at this site before this week, but when we started working in this region 3 years ago, we had assumed, as had our predecessors, that this was a mining pit, that this site was actually mined for shell back in the earlier part of the last century. Very typical in Florida. This happened throughout the St. Johns River Valley, up and down the Atlantic coast, up and down the Gulf Coast. Shell was taken for road construction. It was taken for tabby construction. And so we just assumed that this was a large mining pit. We have since then changed our minds about that. We now consider this to be a fully intact interior to a crescent-shaped deposit that again is closed to the northwest, open here to the southeast, with height of 7 meters over here to the northwest, and then tapering off into the marsh flats over here to the southeast. To my right here is a sand mound that is opposite the opening of this large crescent-shaped shell deposit. This has been somewhat impacted by perhaps a little bit of digging decades ago. There's some damage perhaps from tree throws, but this is constructed out of sand, and this is typical of the woodland period for their mortuary mounds. Very few of these things are left intact. They were heavily looted in previous decades and centuries, because they not only contain the skeletal remains, but often grave goods that include things like pottery and greenstone celts and so forth. So the fact that this is placed here, I don't think is arbitrary or random. It's showing us that there's a geometry to this that makes sense. It's replicated at other sites. So we know, besides the fact that it's a ring, that this interior, which is original to its construction, to its design, is probably the village location. That the interior of this thing, about 75 meters in diameter, is large enough to hold maybe 20 or 25 houses. We suspect that they were probably arrayed in an arc around the interior perimeter of the ridge, and that the very center of it, this area right here, dead center, would have been a plaza, a public space, encircled by the houses themselves, and that would have been the sort of village community pattern you would expect to find for this period, for a community maybe of 150 to 200 people. The earliest evidence we've seen so far is about 2,500 years ago, 500 BC. It's known as the Deptford period, which is a cultural tradition that goes from South Carolina down to Florida, over to Alabama. It's followed by a period of cultural tradition known as the Pasco, and that comes from the Tampa Bay area, dating to about 2,000 years ago. And we think that the entire history of the site is pretty much encapsulated by those two traditions. Deptford at the beginning, Pasco later on. The entirety of the occupation here, maybe 2,500 to 2,000 years ago.
The Lower Suwannee National Wildlife Refuge near Cedar Key has camping, boat ramps, and of course the hike over and around the shell mound. For more information, you can call the refuge office at 352-493-0238, or you can visit their website at fws.gov/Lower Suwannee. Well, the University of Florida has one of the top anthropology archaeology departments in the country. The field of archaeology offers many employment opportunities in research, and most major construction projects need archaeologists to make sure no major archaeological sites are disturbed.